Arlene. Arlene was a year older than our dad was. When he wasn't on a soundstage, he went to Hollywood High School. Different era. That's when you wouldn't get knifed every day you went to school. It was actually a nice place to go. But he spent most of his time on the soundstage, so he made the best of it. He really wanted to be just a regular kid. It was kind of tough. He was a pretty famous dude. But he grew up with all these same kids, and they knew him pretty well. Now, Arlene, being a year older than he was, she was beautiful, and for some reason all the boys at Hollywood High wanted a date with Arlene.
She was a sure thing.
There was that. So our dad finally, she played hard to get, and she finally got that date. Our dad drove over the hill. He lived in Hollywood. He drove over to the valley where she lived to pick her up in his convertible. Nice flashy car, and rock star picks her up, and he said he opened the door, and well, actually, it wasn't rock star yet. He opened the door, and Arlene gets in and sat down, and he said it was like a block of ice. She could care less that Ricky Nelson was taking her to a movie. So to save the date, he turned on the car radio, and wouldn't you know it, Elvis was singing "That's All Right, Mama," and Arlene hit the roof and couldn't believe how sexy Elvis Presley was. Went all nuts over Elvis. So to save the date, he said the first thing that came to his mind, which was, he's not that great, and anyways, I'm going to make a record, and she laughed at him. Just laughed right in his face. "Oh, Ricky, you sing? Give me a break." Thought two things. This date is not going to end very well, at least not as well as I had planned. And I'm going to make a record to hand to her at school in front of her friends and say, "Oh yeah, now laugh." And so it kind of unfolded like a lawn chair after that. He went home, thought about it, and when he wasn't on the soundstage or at Hollywood High, there was a record store in Hollywood called Wallach's Music City. And I know some of you remember record stores, right? Yeah. So that was his hangout. And he would go there with his friends and kill some time, and in the back at Wallach's, there were the places where you could try out the records. Basically, kids went there just to listen to records all day. But if you had enough allowance money, some genius had designed this thing that cut up. It's like a wave. You could sing a karaoke version of a hit song, and if you had enough allowance money, take home a novelty 45 single that you could impress your friends with exactly 10 times because it would disintegrate after 10 spins. But that's all he wanted at first for Arlene, and he took it home and he played it, and it turned out to be pretty good. He sang something that Fats Domino had just cut on the Imperial label called "I'm Walking." And it turned out pretty good. And what our dad realized, obviously, was that our grandfather Ozzy, who wrote, produced, edited, directed, and starred in all those shows, was always short on material. So the joke was, don't do anything around Ozzy, he's going to write it into a script. And so Dad hatched an evil plan. He had a television show. This wasn't good enough. He pushed his little record player out in the hallway and dropped the needle on it while Oz was writing the script for the next week's episode, and he came up to ask what the noise was. "Well, Pop, it's me singing." "Oh, Rick, you've got to sing on the show. This is a great thing." "Gee, Pop, I never thought of that." Yeah. So the thing was, Ozzy always thought, and this is the truth, our grandfather thought that television was a fad and was going to go away to where he could get back out on the road and sing with his wife. That was his true love, truly. He honestly thought that it was just kind of a gag to do for a little while, and just kept getting renewed and renewed and renewed. And so at this point, I think it was pretty clear to our grandfather that his teen idol days were over, and so he got a chance to go back in the recording studio with our father. Now this is at a time when it was 3 tracks. You had basically 2 music tracks and a vocal, and you did it pretty much live. The thing is, people don't realize how great that music was because it was pretty much recorded live as it went down. You couldn't fix it in the mix. You couldn't tune a vocal like they can do with computers. Frankly, Britney Spears wouldn't have been able to happen in the 50s, You just had to have the goods. And so our grandfather and our dad, he was 16 years old at this time. He was a young kid. They didn't have record producers. They just went in and booked some time and made it up as they went along. As a matter of fact, the first musicians on those early records were members of a jazz kind of ensemble, a guy named Barney Kessel, great jazz musician who hated rock and roll to the day he died. But he was the guy playing guitar in the early records before Dad hooked up with great James Burton. So anyways, they went to the studio. All these guys had played source music on Ozzy and Harriet, played a little version of I'm Walking. Television being so new at the time, our grandfather thought it was a great idea to put records out. And he couldn't get a record deal for our father because people, even in the music business then, even with him being a tremendous star, just thought, oh, this is a joke and we don't want to be a part of something that's not going to happen. Our grandfather made sure he did a little deal on Verve Records, a little jazz label, put some records out into the store, and people were saying, "Oz, why are you doing this? Because, it's free milking a cow. Why would kids buy records if they can get it for free on your TV show?" He said, "I think it's a good way of publicizing it. It's like a commercial." And Ozzy was right. If you see it, it was called Ricky the Drummer. Our dad sang a rhythm and blues number. He was going to sing I'm Walking, and he actually sang it live that week, and it was really good. The thing was, nobody knew. It was like a complete surprise to America for everybody that grew up with the Nelson family. Our dad sang I'm Walking, and he looked, even through the Clearasil and the pimples, he looked pretty great. And he sang great. And our dad said everything literally changed overnight. He went to school the next day, and all of the same girls he grew up with wanted to rip his pants off. He said they had to get the Hollywood High football team to take him from class to class, and then they asked him to leave early. It was just disruptive. And it just explained, he said, I was always famous, but being a rock star, that's a whole different level. I like this. And so, of course, it was something that people started getting really used to and wanting. And if you grew up with Ozzie and Harriet, you knew how it was when you tuned in for the last 5 minutes to see if Ricky was going to sing a song, right? And if he didn't, you were really upset. So you tuned in next week. I mean, Ozzie had you guys. He really did. But our pop actually made quite a career out of that. And as I said, you got a little taste of what he was doing. But I think what we're going to do right now is play the very first song that... should we do that?
You want to do anything you want to do, man. This is great. We don't have a drummer.
You know what? We don't have a drummer. Okay. We haven't done I'm Walking in, like, honestly, years.
I don't even know if I can.
What happened to all? That's a good question.
Well, she's still around, and she lives in this hemisphere.